Well, let's start with the ones that you don't like, wind and solar. There are places where it makes great sense. I mean, sure, Texas is the number one wind state for good reason. My home state of Iowa is number 2. The whole Great Plains are brilliant. And while most utilities in most zones, the idea of getting to zero carbon is laughable, in that area, it makes sense. Also, West Texas is a great solar zone. And yes, it takes a lot of land, but if it takes a lot of land that's not in farm use, like in, say, West Texas, that's great. So the first metro in the United States to likely go 100% green is freaking Dallas-Fort Worth. And I don't think there are environmentalists in that city, but they just happen to be at the nexus of the right things. Omaha will probably be second. Denver will probably be third. So, it can work in certain places. For solar, that's 100% true. For wind, it's not anymore. You get above about 650, 700 feet for the turbines, which is where they're going now. They tap stronger and more reliable wind currents. And so Texas is one of the handful of states that is actually now using wind for baseload. It's also a chemistry issue. Yes, we can, but that generates a lot of plutonium as a byproduct. And then you have a civilian plutonium supply chain. That is something that, as a rule, I would try to avoid.
Well, because of the nuclear proliferation weapons issue. Yeah. I mean, we can control it. I mean, it's a very tightly controlled process. We could do it. I mean, it is
technically feasible, but yes, you're talking about having tons and tons of plutonium as a byproduct, weapons grade plutonium as a byproduct every year. And if you get like 10 kilos of that stuff, you have a bomb.
On the renewable side.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you on natural gas. It's more flexible. It's less carbon intensive. It's produced at home. We have a methane leakage issue to solve, but that is something that everyone in the industry broadly agrees is an issue, and they are working on it. I don't mean to suggest they're going to solve it tomorrow, but it's not something that is being ignored. The big advantage of natural gas over the more intermittent stuff isn't just its reliability. It's just, by definition, your wind turbines and your solar panels are not in your population center. And so the weather that you are adapting to with your energy usage locally does not necessarily match up with the production quotient that you have a few hundred miles away. Natural gas, you don't have to worry about that. Natural gas plants, as a rule, are located within 50 miles of their population center, and they can ramp up and ramp down in 10 to 15 minutes.
Do we need to get our heads out of our if we're going to, again, survive in this new world?
I think that the low-hanging fruit for the United States, and a lot of that, is just recycling. The Japanese have shown that if you mine your own trash, you can solve about half of your material inputs issues in a relatively low-cost environment. Not as low cost as we have become used to in kind of this throwaway society that we have around the world for the last 20 years, but something that would not regenerate too much of an inflation pulse, and you don't have to pay that once. Additionally, while there are huge restrictions on every industrial commodity, whether because the processing is China or the sourcing is in Russia or it's in Africa or wherever it happens to be, people forget that we have the whole Western hemisphere here. And most of what we need, not all, most of what we need is within the hemisphere. Now, that, if anything, maybe requires a little bit more of a mindset shift than simply regulation at home. We have to have better relations with countries like Bolivia, which is a country that is very difficult to have a positive conversation with for anyone. But the materials are here. Now, the technologies in play for most of the advanced technologies we're looking at today, including most of the green tech that we're having today, the Western Hemisphere is the only option for getting most of the materials all in one place. Everywhere else, it's kind of scattered, and a lot of times it's behind war zones. So we're having that issue right now with copper and aluminum in Russia, for example. So if these are the technologies we're going to use and depend upon, you are looking at large portions of the world just not playing because they can't get the materials to make the stuff in the first place. And then there's an intermediate step we're going to have to worry about that I'm not too concerned of. Right now, you might produce the lithium in a place like Argentina, but it's processed in China. The same happens for iron ore. The same happens for bauxite. All the processing is in China because it's a low value added thing that the Chinese workforce can do that's very capital intensive. It kind of plays to their strengths with the way they manage. We're going to have to rebuild a lot of that somewhere else. Now, luckily, the United States is going to have the smallest capital adjustment. I'm anticipating a bit of a financial crisis globally. For the US, it'll be less intense. And the United States, courtesy of the shale revolution, has the cheapest electricity in the world. So we're already seeing a lot of steel foundries coming back. Aluminum is starting to kind of sniff around the edges. Copper will probably be next. And there's nothing about lithium processing that is necessarily difficult. It just requires the space and the energy. I'm not so concerned about lithium because I don't think it's a very good battery chemistry. I would rather see us invest more in finding a better chemistry, but one miracle at a time. It was a moment in time. You need a lot of young workers, and the world is running out of those. You need a huge degree of interconnectivity, and we're probably going to see the world breaking up a bit. And you need a huge amount of capital to fund the research. And with the baby boomers moving to retirement, they're taking their money with them. And then finally, you need a huge market to apply it to generate the revenues for the next wave. And that requires an unbroken market, and that is already gone. Africa is a series of 5 stacked plateaus. The internal transport's always been difficult. And so once the world industrialized or started to industrialize in the early 1800s, the Africans couldn't take advantage of those technologies to the same degree that a lot of the rest of the world did. And so technologically and economically, they got left behind. Looking forward, it's a mixed picture. Part of it is as the global system breaks up, a lot of the African countries are going to have some of those materials that the rest of the world really needs. But while Africa is not as industrialized as the rest of the world, they are no longer unindustrialized. They can put up a fight. There will not be a new scramble for Africa colonial style. It'll have to be more in partnership. And it's going to take both sides years to figure out what the comfortable operating environment is that's going to slow everything down. And in the meantime, we are going to have global food shortages that start at the end of this year. So Africa will be struggling through this period of trying to figure out its role. At the same time, there's just not enough food.
Yeah, real rosy picture, Peter. Thank you. We could probably go on for a while, but I know you got another interview, and they just called votes here in the Capitol.
I hear that's important. You should probably go.
It's an important thing. Really appreciate it. I think this is, like I said, I was really looking forward to this one. And I got through your very long book pretty quickly because it's entertaining, it's interesting, it's original, and I highly recommend it. So congrats on that.
Thank you. You do know it's available in audio, right?
Yeah. No, I didn't. But I prefer. Yeah, I prefer not audio. It's hard for me to read, but I still prefer it if I can get through it. The iPad worked out just fine for me. Also, I had to start reading it before it was officially out to prepare for this, so didn't have the audio version. No, this is great. Really appreciate it, Peter. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care.